Hey everyone, Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We've got Nick Farabaugh on. I want to talk about Shedeur Sanders being a top 30 visit for the Steelers. Are they actually looking at him in the first round? What it would take for them to take him at all, where they would. Nick and I debate that in the first segment. We also talk about day two cornerbacks that they could be looking at in the second, third rounds of the draft, as well as finding specifically a separator type of receiver in this draft class, all here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. As I said before, we're joined by the man himself, Nick Farabaugh. He's back. We love having Nick Farabaugh on. You can read his stuff with PennLive.com. Nick, we got to talk about the big news. Shedeur Sanders is coming this Thursday as a top 30 visit for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Of course, Shedeur Sanders, Colorado quarterback, son of NFL Hall of Famer Deion Sanders. Nick, I have been one who has said no to every first round draft a quarterback take that someone has thrown at me. What if this? What if Jackson Dart? What if that? And I still say no to Shedeur Sanders at 21. I think if he was there in the second and somehow they wound up with a second round pick, and then that's a different conversation. But Nick, are you entertaining the idea that the Steelers will and should, and these are two different questions, will take him at 21 or should take him at 21?
All right, two different answers. I'll say this. I'm not going to say no for sure, but I don't think so. Gotcha. I have a hard time believing that they would draft a quarterback they didn't go to his pro day for. I just do. It's that type of position. I think they would show interest in. I would entertain it. I'm a little. I would.
You're at least, a madman.
I would at least think about it. I don't think he would be my top option, but he would not be off the board at all. Listen, I think if you're chasing ceiling versus floor, I don't think Shedeur is the type of player you want. I think he's a pretty high floor player, but I do think, you're probably going to end up, in the middle, kind of the middle of the pack in the quarterback realm with him. And we kind of talk about this every week. How do you compete with the Mahomeses, the Allens, the Lamars, the Burrows, all these guys? And I'm not sure Shedeur is going to be on that level. Now, I think Shedeur's got some really impressive things. I think his accuracy is incredible. I think he's really able to, when he's on the move, I think he makes some good throws out of structure. I think he's a pretty good processor. I think his ability to work the quick game is really, really good. But I think he also has some issues. I think, the pocket management, I think he runs into pressure sometimes. I think he drifts into it. I think some of the mechanics need to be a little sped up for him. When we're talking about why he's fallen, I think that's a part of it. I think the other part of it is, Cam Ward has this just howitzer arm. And I don't think Shedeur does. I think Shedeur's arm is solid, but nothing elite. I think it's better than Dart's, but I don't think it's that much better. So I think Shedeur, for me, Shedeur is like a second round quarterback. That's where I graded him. He's my QB2. In this class, there's not a lot of blue chip, no doubt first round players. So I think at least thinking about it, but I don't think I'd get myself there to take him. I think there's drawbacks to it. And I do think, the thing we have talked about all draft cycle is just focus on quarterback in the middle rounds. If you're going to take it, there's enough depth in the middle rounds of this quarterback class to where you can get a guy at the very least with spot starter or long-term backup upside, which is completely fine. You need young guys in that room regardless. They need to take swings at that position, but I don't think necessarily you have to force the issue in the first round. So I would consider Shedeur more than I would consider Dart or Milroe or any other quarterback, but I don't think I would take him at 21 personally.
Okay. Thank you. That's the point that I'm getting right there. Again, I am fine with taking Shedeur Sanders if they trade back into the second round, trade up into the second round, or he's sitting there 83. He won't be there 83. He will not fall that far. I tell you, I'm very confident in saying that. But if they somehow wound up with a second round pick and he was sitting there, I could kind of see that. I'd get that. Okay, like that's around the range where I think that he would value there. I'm very close to, I think, finishing my top 100 board. I have the list of names now. I just need to double check and do all my aesthetics with it. But but he ranks in like the second round range when I do my top 100 comparison player versus player stuff that I do there. And just looking at that, Nick, like again, like you mentioned floor and ceiling. A floor guy, yeah, sure, he has the accuracy. He could work out and become a good starter for you. But if you're taking a quarterback in the first round, you are doing so because you think he can change your franchise. You're not taking the quarterback in the first round to sit behind the quarterback that you draft next year in the first round, because then you've wasted a first round pick on a player that's probably not going to see the field if your other pick is most likely right, unless you're hedging your bets. You're just saying, hey, I'm going to hedge my bet here. But like to your point, you say the amount of guys who are blue chip first round guys that are available in this draft are slim. And I really think at 21, they're going to have a really good shot at it. When I look at, especially at positions of need, I have a hard time thinking that Kenneth Grant and Derek Carmen and Walter Nolan, that none of them will be there. I have a hard time thinking that if they're not there, that some of the receivers that they want won't be there. And if all of those guys are gone, that means someone else has fallen to them that's crazy, like Ashton Jeanty or Will Johnson or Jahdae Barron. I don't think any of those guys are going to fall to them. But what I try to do for every year in the draft, I try to prepare for craziness, because the Raiders will take a Cleveland Farrell and you'll just be like, wait, what? Like, where'd that come from? There's just random picks that come from all sides that say, okay, this is opening up some new doors. Let's see what they could do here. And that's where I look at this and I think, okay, let's look at the possibilities here. And I think that with that, the Steelers are going to get a guy that can be first round starter capable at a key position of need where it's not a reach. You're expecting this guy to start sooner rather than later. And it's worth to get that player in the first round, especially when you're planning on trying to go get your quarterback next year and trading up to go get him, because you need these picks this year to be part of that foundation that you're building to welcome that quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about defensive line being what I would do, or another wide receiver, I think is still a very meaningful endorsement. I also think a guy like Barron makes a lot of sense. Shedeur is I think kind of a very safe prospect, and I mean that. I do think he's going to be a fine starter in this league. I actually think when I look at the quarterback class, man, it's not an inspiring class. Like, if you love a guy so much, you're going to want to go up and get that guy, or you're going to want to make some move to take that guy, right? Like, you want to feel a way about a guy when you're getting him. And I just, no one in this class outside of Cam Ward, I really like Cam Ward, but they have no shot at him, makes me feel that way. Even a guy like Shedeur, who I can see having a solid NFL career, he's just not a guy to me that gets you all giddy, right? He's like, man, that's our franchise guy. That's the game changer for the franchise. I think Shedeur has a lot of positives to his game. I just think if the Steelers were in the NFC, I think this would be a way different discussion. I always say this, the NFC would be a way different discussion to me, because I think you could really talk yourself into floor-raising quarterbacks there. Like, you look at guys like Jared Goff and Brock Purdy, who are really good players, but they're not complete ceiling raisers, right? You talk about Allen's, Mahomes, the Burrows, those are ceiling raisers, Jackson, all those guys. The Steelers need a ceiling raiser, and so they need to be swinging on upside. And I just think Shedeur doesn't have this insane upside that some people kind of look at when you look at his game, when you study his game in depth. I think he's a solid player. I actually think, if you want to look at how he's going to kind of really work in the NFL, I actually don't think Brock Purdy is a terrible kind of launch point for that, where he is a guy that can make some of those plays similar to Purdy. But I just think quarterback right now, it doesn't fit lockstep with where they are. Next class in 2026 looks good. Obviously, we don't know for sure if it's going to be good. Sure. There looks to be some nice talent there. The Steelers have the comp picks, so they're loaded up for the trade-up scenario. They are set up for that. And I feel like that kind of taking quarterback now, you can't deny that they've put in the work on the quarterback trail, but taking a quarterback in the first round, it kind of feels like throwing out the long-term book, which is, I think, would be the worst thing you could do.
No, I agree with you. I think it just you got to maintain this. And in fact, the episode that I did with Alan just yesterday, if y'all missed it, was why the Steelers better not be thinking about canceling there, because there was the notion thrown out by Daniel Jeremiah. Well, if the Steelers don't get Aaron Rodgers, they're just gonna draft the quarterback in the first round this year. I'm just like, the Aaron Rodgers decision should not have either no bearing on what the Steelers plan to do at quarterback next year, and that's where I think that's just not going to happen. So on the same note, I just do not see the Steelers under any circumstances drafting a quarterback at 21 unless, lo and behold, somehow Cam Ward falls there, and there's absolutely no way that he's not the first overall pick. I think that he's going right away. If he's not that, he's going number 2. Like, he's not leaving the top 3, top 5. Like, that's not happening. So let's look at the realities here, and I think that there's a lot of real first-round grade players at key positions the Steelers could really use right now and for the long term that they can get over, again, like you pointed out, a solid floor quarterback, but not one that changes things and raises the ceiling. That's what you're hoping for becomes more available next year when you have ammunition to trade up, and when there's probably going to be more quarterbacks that project to be like that, so that there's a chance that other teams are gunning for the guy that's not your guy. So we'll talk. I want to switch topics here because we're way over our first segment time here. I want to talk day 2 cornerbacks with you, Nick. We'll do that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I remind you, this show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props. They have 3-pointers to steals to assists. FanDuel has so many ways to bet on your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets in the same game parlay for a chance to win big on FanDuel. Be sure to not miss out by going to FanDuel.com to sign up today and claim your $250 bonus bets today if you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. That's $250 in bonus bets if you hit on your first bet of $5 or more for new customers at FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh. Nick, let's talk about cornerback. Now, we have broached the idea of if a guy just happens to fall to them at 21, like a Will Johnson, a Jahdae Barron, don't think either are happening. Then that's a whoa, stop the presses. This is a game. This is a different kind of game changer guy there. But let's talk about day 2 cornerbacks for the prospects of if the Steelers do acquire somehow a second-round pick via trade, trading up, trading back, trading a player, whatever that is, or if they just take one at 83. I want to first start by going over guys you expect to be available in the second round that are worth second-round picks. First, I want to talk about a small college guy that got injured, Siobhan Revelle out of East Carolina. Tested brilliantly in college, and his tape looks very good, but he has a torn ACL, but he said he's going to be back. He's going to be healthy. There are people putting him in the first round. I have him ranked in that range, but do you think there's a chance that he does slip to the second round at all because of his injury?
I think there's a definite chance he does. Listen, the injury concerns, the fact that you haven't had tape on him in a while. I think his tape is really fun. I think he's a ball hawk. I think he's pretty fluid in and out of his breaks when he's kind of matching receivers and mirroring them. I think he's a fun player, but I also think, it's not just the injury. I think there's concerns in his game. I don't think he's a flawless prospect. I think, he's not going to be the style for every team either. Some teams are going to want longer corners. They're going to prefer guys like Trey Amos, I think, or, guys like that in that tier. He's kind of grouped in with a few guys. You could throw Benjamin Morrison in there. He's a solid player. But for the Steelers, he just kind of feels like he's kind of stuck in the orbit of too early. Even if they get a second-round pick, like there's probably no way they end up with an early second unless they trade out. And if they do trade out, I imagine they will go elsewhere than corner in that respect, to be quite honest with you. Well, not at least his archetype of corner. I think they'd probably prefer guys like Trey Amos or Azareye'h Thomas.
That's where I'm at. Like, press guys, guys that can play physical type of corners. That's Azareye'h Thomas is one of the guys that I have my eyes on. as far as where he'll be, because some people have put him in the first round. A lot of people have him more like a second, maybe even a third round cornerback. If he fell to the third round, that'd be very interesting for the Steelers to look at, even if it means trading up in the third round to get him, because I think that he has potential there. But let's look at these other day 2 cornerbacks. You brought up Thomas. There's also guys like Maxwell Harrison out of Kentucky, Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame. The one guy that I really like, Darian Porter out of Iowa State. I love Darian Porter just for his measurables and the things that I saw from him there. If I were to rank those guys, I would jump Darian Porter up to being a priority. And then I'm not as big on Hairston just because I feel like he's too light. I feel like he's too small. He can make some really impressive plays on the ball, but with the way the Steelers want to play cornerback, you want a strong dude, a guy that's not going to get pushed off. And I think that's where he might lack a bit, where a Thomas would not, a Darian Porter would not. Those guys are long, those guys are physical, and those guys also have good athleticism. Now, Thomas didn't help himself with his 40-yard dash, but and I think that's a part of why he didn't skyrocket up to the top to be a definite first-round pick. But Darian Porter did light it up, and I really like the idea of what he could bring to the table.
Yeah, Darian Porter's very boomer bust. He feels like a moldable ball of clay, but he's got the ball skills because he was a former receiver. So you really see it show off, to be quite honest with you. He's got a lot of really good attributes on the physical side. He's a little raw, which I think with the Steelers' type of corner worries me a little bit. It always does when you have a guy a little raw, but I like Darian Porter's tape. Harrison, as you said, is kind of skinnier. He could fall off. Tackling attempts. There's like a clear limitation in his game. He gets pushed at the top of routes. Honestly, Hairston, very similar in some ways to Dante Jackson. I really do see some similarities in his game. I think he's a fun player, though. My favorite day 2 corner is Thomas. I really like Azaria.
I love Thomas.
He's my favorite. I love him. Him and Amos are my 2 guys, honestly.
Okay.
Not just for the Steelers. I just like their tape better. I think, Azaria Thomas running a 4.5, that is a little bit of a concern just because corner is such a speed position, but he's such a clean player on tape. You love that. Amos is, again, super clean player, not real grabby. I also really like, if we're going later into the day 2 poll, my favorite slot corner in this class is Kobe Bryant.
Over what's his name? Jacob
Parrish.
Parrish
is really fun too. I like Parrish too, but I really like Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant is very wiry, and so he's a little less. I think he's like 180. I think he's 6 foot 180. So he's a little wiry, but man, this guy has ball skills, athleticism. He would make the all chirp team. He's just got a chip on his shoulder. He's physical. He could fit the run. I love that about his game. I really like Parrish too. There's a few guys in that range, that early day 3, late day 2 range that I'm a fan of. But Kobe Bryant and Jacob Parrish are right there. And then Quincy Riley out of Louisville too, I think is really fun. So there's a lot of – I see a lot of people talking down on the corner class. I actually think it's a pretty solid group.
I think so too. Like, I think that's why I wanted to explore this, because I think that whereas running back could be a really good day 2 pick, especially with that third round pick that they naturally have right now. But man, like if one of these corners is sitting there, it's tough to feel them passing up. And I brought this up, Nick. The Steelers, they've got Eccles, they have Bishop. What kind of prospect would make you jump and say, you know what, forget all those guys, I'm taking this guy and he's my new slot?
Yeah, I mean, it would take a really good slot corner. I think a guy like Jahdae Barron would do that for me. I think Jahdae Barron can be very much in the vein of instant slot corner, instant impact. A guy like a Cooper DeJean, Brian Branch, what we've seen those guys come in, even Andrew Phillips with the New York Giants, like those types of guys that have stepped in and just played at such a high level. I feel like, he kind of projects to that. I'm so high on Azaria Thomas. I really am. I think he's such a good player. I know the 4.5 speed's a concern. If I were GM sitting at the back half of the first round, I would think about Azaria Thomas. He's a really clean press prospect, and he's only 20. I think that's the other thing. He's so young, and his inexperience you think would show up a lot more, but it just doesn't. He brings so much to the table, and so those 2 guys are really, really fun. players. If you want a later round prospect, I know we're on day 2, guys, but if you want a later round prospect that's fun, that can do a lot of cool things, Caleb Ransaw out of Tulane. I don't think he's on many people's radars, but
he's on mine. I'll tell you that much.
Man, he does a lot of cool things. He's got good long speed. He's physical. He can play kind of all over the place. He can play outside. He can play slot. He's in some safety because he's played box outside and slot. And I mean, sometimes they even line him up as like a pseudo Sam backer, and he's 5'11", 200. But man, he's really, really fun. He's got that kind of average athleticism that you look for in that late round pick. He tested much better. I think his playing tape kind of showcased just a solid athlete, not an elite one. But man, elite run defender as a defensive back. I think you throw this dude in the slot and he could be a really good rundown nickel. And you probably won't have to spend like a 6th round pick on him. A lot of fun. If you don't know who Caleb Ransaw is, just turn on the tape. I think you'll find out. You'll like this guy a lot.
Yeah, I haven't explored late round slot cornerbacks in this draft class yet. That's not the area that I've been looking into too much. I've been more so breaking film down on the guys to build my top 100 board, which will be assembled soon. I believe it should be posted in the Post Gazette by the end of the week or so, and then we'll be able to talk about it on here. But there's still a lot to talk about there. I want to talk about wide receiver next, but specifically separator wide receivers, because we hear about how that's the one thing the Steelers don't naturally have on their roster right now for the long term. I want to talk about that with Nick Farabaugh here on the Locked On Steelers podcast and who that player could be in this draft class. We talk about that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, remind you, this show is brought to you by Chewy. You've probably heard of Chewy. They really do have everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. Whether you're shopping for food, treats, or even pet health care, Chewy makes it fast, easy, and affordable. With over 100,000 from products from all your favorite brands, Chewy has everything your pet needs, from food, treats, toys, beds, and grooming. It's not just for dogs and cats. They've got supplies for birds, fish, reptiles, and small pets too. Chewy also makes it easy to manage your pet's health with prescriptions, telehealth vet visits, and even in-person vet clinics rolling out nationwide. AutoShip is a game changer. You can set up automatic deliveries for food, treats, or any essentials so that you never run out. You can easily change or cancel it at any time. Chewy has everything that you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. So right now, you can save $20 on your first order and get free shipping by going to chewy.com or clicking the link in the description. Save $20 on your first order with free shipping by clicking the link in the description. Minimum purchase required. New customers only. Terms and conditions apply. See site for complete details. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Nick Farabaugh of PennLive.com. Nick, let's roll into wide receiver. Now, we've talked a lot about wide receivers in this class. We've talked about guys that could go get in the first round. I want to talk specifically about a guy who can line up, get separation, be that sort of what Deontay Johnson was for a little bit for the Steelers, what Cooper Kupp was, for the Rams at times. A guy that his best trait is he's going to beat you in his route. Antonio Brown, not to that level because it's ridiculous how great he was for how long he was. But a guy who could be a separator guy in this draft class, because you look at a lot of these upper guys that we're talking about, the Jaden Higginses, the Tet McMillans, they're guys that can go up and get the football. They're guys that are long. Alec Yamanor, these are guys that are bigger. They can go up and get the ball. But then there's other guys like Emeka Egbuka. There's guys like Luther Bird, and there's guys like Jack Besh. And it makes me wonder, can they be good separators out there? And are there other guys that if the Steelers don't go after him in the first or the second round, or maybe even the third round, that you got an eye on to say, hey, this guy could be that answer that you're looking for?
Well, I think the one first round guy that sticks out is Golden. I think Matthew Golden can easily be the route running type if you want him to be. And so he's the top of the guys. But if we're talking about day 2 guys, I mean, there's one guy that sticks out, Kyle Williams. I think out of Washington State really to stick out, man. He's got great routes. I mean, you look at his release package, man, it is super deep on top of that. He's a really fun kind of route runner, and he's truly a route running specialist. I think that's the cool thing about him. There's not a ton of those in this class, but I think there's enough When you look at guys like Jalen Royals, I think Royals is another guy that has really good route running and can separate. I also look at Jalen Noel, the other Iowa State wide receiver. He can really separate specifically down the football field. And so those are a few guys that really stick out to me. I think Noel, Royals, Golden, and Williams, if you're talking about the first 3 rounds of this class. I'll throw out another one. I think that maybe people don't think about because he's 6'2", but Torrey Horton out of Colorado State. He's got some pretty good hip sync in his game. He's able to separate. I wouldn't say it's the kind of top of his game, but it's definitely part of it. And so he sticks out as well to me as guys that naturally separate. And so if they want a separator, I think there's options here. If they want a big body that can go up and get contested catches, there's also plenty of those.
So one name that I think could be interesting if he falls in the 3rd round, what would you say to Xavier Restrepo out of Miami?
He's a little too slot specific for me. I don't think they need a guy that's slot specific. I don't hate the idea of drafting a guy that's going to play mainly in the slot, but can play Z at times. Like that's why I'm not against a guy like Ibuka, for example. But Restrepo, and it's not just the testing. I know the testing has been a thing, and he's a really tough player. I think Restrepo can be like a chain mover, but he's more of a zone beater. He's not the fastest, he's not the biggest, but he's got really good hands. He's tough. If you play him in 11 personnel, he'll give you good things. But I'm just not sure that he's the type of player they need right now. I think you look at a more kind of inside out type of player, or even a pure outside in type guy as a route runner that they could look at more so than Restrepo.
Okay, I can hear that, and I think that's the thing here is when people think separators, they often think small guys. They often think small, quick guys that can only play in the slot. Separators can also line up on the outside. They can also just win off the ball really well. There's different ways to make that happen, and we've certainly seen our fair share of guys there. All right, I don't want to be that guy, but I'm going to be that guy. I'm going to pull up a dude that you and I have talked about quite a few times, who we've talked to in person quite a few times. That's Pitt's Konata Mumpfield, because I don't know if people peep, mock draft simulators and that stuff, but there was an interesting switch that I saw, because for months when you looked at PFF's mock draft simulator and you looked at wide receiver and you said, oh, Konata Mumpfield, he's in like the 200s and he should not be looked at. All of a sudden, it seems that PFF has caught up to what some of us in Pittsburgh have been talking about. That Konata Mumpfield is a good player. They've now put him as their 152nd ranked player on the draft in PFF. He's more of like a 4th-ish round prospect type of guy here. I have written about Konata Mumpfield a lot. I'm doing a series about following him through the draft process for the Post-Gazette. There's been 3 parts to that series, one at the end of the season for his last year at Pitt, one after the Combine, and then one after his pro day. We're going to do a follow-up as we get closer to the draft. So check it out at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But Nick, it seems like I think that people are starting to catch on to how good Konata Mumpfield is, and what makes him so good is his ability to separate. And you and I saw him in person. Well, actually, no, you weren't right, but you and I know that he was working with Zach Azzani during Pitt's pro day when they were doing that. What would you say to the Steelers taking like a flyer on Konata in the 4th or 5th round this year?
I'm down with it. I think Konata's always been a really underrated route runner. I've always been a Konata Mumpfield fan. I liked him when he transferred from Akron to Pitt.
Same.
So, man, I'm a big time Konata Mumpfield fan. And when I look at Konata, the thing about it is I think he can play inside or outside. I think that's the cool thing about Konata is he's not a strictly one kind of fits all thing. He can play inside or out. I also will throw out a name for you, in that range that people, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll know I've been a fan of this guy for a while. Ricky White. Ricky White out of UNLV, man, is such a fun player. He's bigger than Konata. He's, I believe, around 6'1", about 190. But this dude has elite speed. He is really fluid in and out of breaks. He's a vertical threat that can win down the field. He can win horizontally and turn things into touchdowns. I think it's a little tough to kind of, put him into an NFL offense just because the go-go offense is so different than every other offense you think of.
Yes.
But his routes are really solid. And he's going to immediately day one, because Danny Smith's going to love this one. This guy's going to be an elite gunner on day one. I guarantee it. His special teams value is through the roof. So I really liked him. The other name we didn't mention, he doesn't fit into the kind of separator type, but this is a type of guy that I think is kind of a true playmaker, just get him the ball and see what he does after the catch type guy. Savion Williams. I do think the Steelers are going to like Savion Williams.
Okay.
I mean, the Cordero Patterson comps are thrown around a lot, but man, are they apt. I mean, he is, in Cordero Patterson's prime, man, that guy was a problem with the ball in his hands. And you just kind of had to account for him at all times while he's developing kind of the game around it, because he's a little raw as a route runner. And all of that. This guy, if he gets a screen, I mean, he's tough to bring down. So he's another player that is just kind of completely like off the rails, right? He's not really just a contested catch guy. He's not a separator. He's kind of a yak guy. He's an interesting kind of twist up in this class, I think, compared to the rest of them.
I hear you on that. But again, there are a group of guys like that. Like, and you and I have talked about, if the Steelers do sign Aaron Rodgers, which, ladies and gentlemen, today, if you're listening to this and watching this on April 9th, is the day of the Pat McAfee show. And I swear to God, if Aaron Rodgers does this and I have to do a show like tomorrow, that's going to be a whole thing. That's going to drive me nuts. But one thing that we talked about is, if Aaron Rodgers does sign with the Steelers, like we think he will, having a separator wide receiver who can get that space, especially in the middle part of the field, that could be very useful to a Steelers offense in 2025. And every quarterback can use that, even beyond that. So that's why I bring up separator wide receivers, and that's why I bring up Konata Mumpfield, because, man, I think he'd be really nasty with what the Steelers and like, you put him across from a Metcalf and a Pickens, and like that would be very interesting for teams to have to plan for.
Yeah, man, I love the separator type, because even if, let's say, George Pickens leaves after this year, I think having that separator across from DK Metcalf, I mean, that's what Metcalf's had his whole career. Tyler Lockett is literally that. And so I love that idea of just having a different switch up. I really enjoyed the George Pickens, Deontay Johnson dynamic, because they were such different players. I thought that was always great to have that route runner type that you can trust against man. And Konata definitely checks that box. I think there's a few guys in this class that do, and I do want to stress this. My favorite route runner type in the mid rounds is Kyle Williams. I think he's just awesome. I really do love his game. And in the first round, I think Matthew Golden is a completely great pick for them if they wanted a receiver. I think he's an awesome player. And I think the cool thing about, the Goldens, the Williamses, et cetera, people would point to Matthew Golden being drafted and say, well, this means Pickens is getting traded. I don't think that has to be the case. And I think that's cool thing about those types of players is the separators are such a different changeup from DK Metcalf and George Pickens. I think it allows you just to have a 4-5 deep rotation at that position, and that's what Rodgers really likes to have anyways.
Absolutely. We got a lot still to discuss before the draft. It's getting closer and closer. Nick, thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, you could follow me on Twitter at Farabaugh Blue Sky Nick Farabaugh. Make sure to read the stuff over at PennLive.com. Got a lot of stuff coming out over there. Make sure to check out the YouTube channel, Steelers on Penn Live.
Absolutely. He's Nick Farabaugh. I'm Chris Carter. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, all the social media, same handle everywhere at Carter Critiques. You can read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com, including the 3 parts of the Konata Mumpfield series if you want to follow his path throughout the draft. And you can find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every Monday through Friday on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get all of those Monday through Friday episodes. We're back here tomorrow with another episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Keep it here.